The bolt slid shut before I even turned around. It wasn't loud. Just a click. But in that moment, I knew she meant it. This wasn't a prank. The bulb overhead flickered. The basement smelled like old varnish and mouse traps. My breath fogged in the cold air. I stepped back, heart pounding, and tried the handle. It didn't budge. "Amanda," I called. Silence. Just the hum of the freezer and the distant rattle of a furnace kicking on. I banged once, then again. "Amanda, this isn't funny." Her voice drifted down, light and sweet like syrup on poison. "You always said you were the strong one. Let's see if you last till morning." I froze. Not from the temperature, though it seeped through my cardigan, but from something older. Older than this house. Older than both of us. Amanda had done things before. Little things. Taken credit for my projects. Told boys in high school I was clingy. Once left me at a gas station for 2 hours. To teach me a lesson. But this? This wasn't a joke. This was calculated. I stepped away from the door, scanning the room. One small lamp, a folding chair, a crate labeled X-Mess 2004. In the corner, above the stairs, a red dot blinked. Camera. My throat tightened. She planned this. I sat on the cold cement and pulled the blanket from the crate. It smelled like old cinnamon. Dust clung to the sleeves of my coat. I fumbled in my pocket, hoping for my phone. Nothing. I'd left it upstairs to charge. Of course I had. That night, I didn't cry, but I did whisper. To the camera, to myself. "I'm not 15 anymore," I said. "I'm not the girl you can erase." I wasn't scared of the dark. I was scared of what would happen if I stayed silent again. By morning, I would remember everything. And for the first time, I'd write the ending myself. Would you forgive a sister who did this? Or would you finally fight back? Where are you listening from? And has your family ever pushed you too far? Drop a 1 if you've ever stayed silent too long. I stood in Amanda's kitchen the next morning, hands wrapped around a chipped mug that still smelled faintly of nutmeg. The silence upstairs told me she was still asleep. Or pretending to be. I didn't care. I just needed to feel something steady beneath me. The floor creaked like it always did, but today it felt louder. Like even the house was ashamed. The mug was from our childhood. World's Best Sisters. Printed in faded pink. Amanda had given it to me when we were 9. She broke the matching one 2 years later during a tantrum. Claimed I stole her spotlight. At a school recital. That pattern never changed. She gave, then destroyed. Built moments just to own how they fell apart. I moved around the kitchen slowly, checking the cabinets. Familiar cereal boxes, polished granite counters, her glass smoothie blender still stained with yesterday's blueberries. Everything in place, too perfect. Too curated. Like she lived in a catalog page where no one could question what went missing between the lines. Last night came back in flashes. Cold cement, blinking red dot, the sound of the lock turning. I still hadn't said anything. She hadn't either. No apology. No confrontation. Just a shared silence that stretched like plastic wrap over a rotting truth. Amanda came down an hour later, hair curled, lips glossed. "You slept okay?" she asked, tone light, rehearsed. "I made coffee," I said flatly, not answering her question. She nodded like nothing had happened, like we weren't pretending. "Let's get some photos before I head to the podcast." Morning light's great. That's why I was here. The podcast. A reunion. Her version of healing. We posed on the porch. She draped an arm around me and whispered, "Smile like you mean it." I looked at the pine trees instead. Flash, flash, flash. Somewhere inside that phone, we looked happy. And that would be enough for her. Enough for the people watching. Enough to sell. She left shortly after. Keys jangling, heels sharp against the brick path. "Don't wait up," she sang. I didn't. Instead, I walked into the guest room, shut the door, and pulled out the shoebox I'd hidden inside my suitcase. Receipts, printed emails, one flash drive, old notes in my mother's handwriting warning me to be careful. Long before Amanda started selling sisterhood in live streams, she hadn't changed. She'd evolved, gotten better at it. But I had changed too. I wasn't here to be seen. I was here to remember. I wandered through the house, phone tucked in my coat pocket, snapping quiet photos. Not dramatic ones, just details. A closet lined with new ring lights. A whiteboard with content plans written in glitter marker. The words, Reunion Week Push Forgiveness Message, circled twice. My stomach turned. She wasn't healing. She was launching. In the den, I found a pile of framed photos stacked on the floor. Us, at various ages. One from my graduation, another from a trip to Yellowstone I barely remembered. A third, newer, was staged at her hand in mine, both laughing. I'd never seen it before, never taken it. It was AI, stitched. Someone else's background, someone else's smile. My skin prickled. Back in the kitchen, I opened the fridge. Bottles of chlorophyll water lined the top shelf. Amanda's branded labels on everyone. Gut fla grace. I stared at them like they might speak. I took one out, twisted the cap, and took a long drink. It tasted like mint and something metallic. I spat it out into the sink, wiped my mouth with the sleeve of my cardigan. Then I laughed. A small, bitter sound. That night in the basement, I'd whispered promises to myself. I wouldn't stay quiet. I wouldn't be edited again. I grabbed my laptop from my suitcase and opened a private folder. Deck, 2023. Inside were voice memos I'd started after therapy. Small entries, quiet rage. Memories I hadn't wanted to forget again. I played one. She told me I was lucky to have her. That other sisters wouldn't bother. But I remember being 12 and watching her swap out my school photos before Dad got home. I sat still, listening to my own voice. Me, 5 months ago, different, but not gone. A new entry blinked. I pressed record. Caroline Whitman. Colorado Springs, December 17, 2023. Amanda left me locked in her basement last night. Said, let's see if she lasts till morning. I did. I lasted, and now I want it on record. This wasn't a game. This wasn't healing. This was erasure. Again. I hit save. Dragged the file into the drive. Then I emailed it to myself, to my therapist, and to an account Lorna had made for me 2 years ago, just in case. Later that evening, I sat on the couch and flipped through Amanda's Instagram on mute. Livestream after livestream. Fake comments. Posed hugs. Caption. Reunion healed us. Grateful for second chances. I didn't comment. But I didn't scroll away either. I just sat there, listening to the quiet creak of the floor, the tick of the old kitchen clock, and the distant sound of a notification dinging on Amanda's tablet in the hallway. I waited. I waited for something to crack. Amanda's house had always smelled like lavender and Windex. Everything polished to a shine that felt more like performance than comfort. But that morning, the scent turned my stomach. I sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through emails I hadn't checked in 2 days, trying to pretend my hands weren't trembling. A new alert pinned subject, podcast outline, healing the sister wound. From Amanda. Holloweg Brightgrip Media. I clicked. The document opened with pastel branding and her signature flourish. 2 sisters. One fractured past. One powerful reunion. My name was all over it. Caroline Whitman, former archivist, quietly successful, emotionally distant. Amanda's write-up had cast me like a character. I wasn't a person. I was a narrative prop. Midway through the document. Trigger event. Surprise basement moment, childhood callback. Caroline emerged stronger. Symbol of survival. I stared at the words. Trigger event. That wasn't a memory. That was my trauma, being shaped into a viral segment. I closed the laptop. Amanda walked in seconds later, phone in one hand, ring light in the other. She wore a sage green wrap dress, and a microphone clipped to her collarbone. "I need you to wear something neutral. Soft colors read better," she said without looking at me. I blinked. Neutral. Yeah. Soft but not sad. You know. Like oatmeal, but resilient. She smiled, setting the ring light down. "We're recording a few pickup shots for the teaser." "I never agreed to a teaser," I said. Her eyes didn't waver. "It's already drafted." I should have walked out. But I didn't. Instead, I stood in her bathroom 20 minutes later, pulling a beige sweater over my head. The tag itched. My reflection in the mirror looked blank. I took a photo, not of myself, but of the script taped behind the vanity mirror. Shot 30. Caroline looks away, chokes up slightly. Amanda reaches out. Cut on touch. She wasn't just shaping the truth. She was directing it. We filmed in the living room. Amanda smiled on cue, dabbed her eyes with a cloth between takes to make them shine. I said little. Just enough to not look hostile. Afterward, she ordered lunch, salads in branded boxes. Greens and grace. Her face printed on the lid with a quote. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's rebranding." That night, while she edited in her office, I sat on the guest bed, reading through the outline again. There it was. A segment titled, "The Basement Breakthrough." Breakthrough. Is that what we're calling it now? I pulled out my recorder and whispered. Amanda called locking me in a basement a breakthrough. Her version of healing comes with camera angles. The next morning, she asked if I wanted to help plan the launch event. Said I'd get exposure. I declined. She frowned. "You sure? It could be good for your confidence." I looked at her and saw a stranger. Not the sister who once made me birthday pancakes, but someone who'd studied my weakness long enough to merchandise it. Later that day, I received a text from an old college friend. "Hey, saw Amanda's teaser on TikTok. Looked intense. You okay?" I opened the link. It had 100,000 views. Clips of us from childhood, overlaid with piano music. A voiceover, not Amanda's, said, "Sometimes healing begins in the darkest place, even a basement." Then, us hugging. A staged clip from porch footage. I never gave consent. I never saw the camera. I walked into her office. "You posted the teaser." She turned, smiled. "Isn't it beautiful? You edited that without my permission." "It's not just about you," she replied gently. "It's about the message." My fists clenched. "You locked me in a basement." She exhaled, slow. "You always go so far, Caroline. It was one night. For perspective. You're stronger now. You can't turn my pain into your redemption arc." "Why not?" she said, her voice cooler now. "You weren't using it." I walked out. Slammed the door. My heart felt like it would tear through my ribs. That evening, I texted Lorna. "Me, still have that Dropbox folder." Lorna, "Off course. Want me to pull it?" Me, "Yes, and back it up twice." Something inside me had shifted. I wasn't angry. I was done. Amanda crossed a line she didn't believe existed. And now, I needed to draw one of my own. If your family turned your trauma into content, would you stay silent or speak out? Amanda left for a brand meeting just after noon. I waited until her SUV disappeared down the curved driveway before heading into her office. The door wasn't locked. Of course it wasn't. She never thought she had anything to hide. Inside, it smelled like citrus cleaner and ambition. The windows were cracked open. Soft jazz played on loop. Her desk was a curated storm. Ring light cords, lip gloss tubes, a whiteboard with color-coded content deadlines. But it was the black folder beneath her monitor that drew my attention. It had my name on it. In Sharpie, I opened it. Inside, a contract. Title: Bright Grit Media Partnership, Q4 Deliverables. Client: Amanda Holloway. Subject: Caroline Whitman. Narrative integration. Clause 4.3. Stop me cold's eye. Influencer agrees to deliver 3 high engagement conflict-based content cycles per quarter. Themes may include family tension, forgiveness narrative, public resolution. Attached was a breakdown of projected reach, affiliate links, podcast interviews scheduled, all built on or story. My trauma. Packaged, priced, positioned. I took photos of every page. My hands were sweating. On her desktop, a tab was still open: Draft Campaign Deck. Slide 12 showed a mock-up, a newsletter titled, Surviving the Basement, with a quote in stylized cursive, "You only heal when the world hears you scream." It was attributed to me. I never said that. I backed out, gently closed the folder, and left the room. Back in the guest room, I dropped onto the bed and buried my face in my hands. How many times had she done this? To me. To others. My mind drifted to a night 12 years ago. Senior year, I had just won a university award for archival research. Small, but meaningful. Amanda showed up at the ceremony wearing white, head to toe, and cried louder than I did, said she was so proud. Then posted a photo with the caption, "When one of us wins, we both shine." That night, she edited the award name out and replaced it with Whitman Family Recognition. I only found out because a professor emailed to congratulate both of us. Back then, I said nothing. Now I knew better. That afternoon, Amanda texted Amanda, "Be camera, ready at 5. Big reveal night. Emotional moment incoming. Amanda, let's wear matching blush. For the brand." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and started a private email thread with Lorna. Subject: for legal storage only. Attached were the photos from Amanda's office, a screen grab of the contract clause, a clip from her teaser, and a voice memo I'd recorded the night before. I wrote, "If anything happens to me or this gets buried, send it to Bright Grit's board and media partners. This isn't healing, this is harvesting." I hit send. At 5:03, Amanda knocked. "Ready?" I opened the door slowly. Her dress matched mine. Same blush tone. Same neckline. She smiled like we were going to prom. "Let's make people believe in sisterhood again," she said, eyes gleaming. The ring light buzzed softly. The camera blinked red. We sat on the couch. She took my hand. "Saul, we've come far, haven't we?" she began. I didn't answer. Just stared at the blinking red light. The same red that glowed above that basement door. She kept talking about growth and grace and mutual forgiveness. Then she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't ruin this. You know how hard I worked." I smiled, small, careful. And for the first time, I leaned into the camera and said, "Yes, Amanda, we've come very far." Because now, I had everything I needed. If you had one chance to expose them, would you take it? Or stay silent to keep the peace? I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid Amanda would do it again, but because I knew, deep in my chest, she wouldn't need to. She already got what she wanted. Control. Silence. The kind of silence that doesn't bruise but sinks in. Like smoke you didn't notice until your lungs burned. The guest room was cold. The kind of cold that creeps behind your knees and up your spine. The ceiling fan ticked overhead. Tick. 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 Like a clock counting down to a version of me I no longer wanted to be. I opened my laptop again. That email to Lorna sat in my sent folder. Unread. Unbothered. Still there. The photos were backed up twice. Dropbox and an offline drive. My journal entries stored under a nondescript folder name. I had the camcorder card zipped in my suitcase's hidden flap. I had everything. But my hands still trembled. Because I knew how this played out, not just with Amanda. with the world. They'd see a woman in her 40s, soft-spoken, reserved. They'd see a popular sister, successful, polished. They'd hear, basement, and think, overreaction. They'd hear, contract, and say, business. They'd see me standing in my truth and ask why I couldn't let the past go. They always ask that. Why I couldn't let it go. I remember being 17. Amanda had just ruined my college interview outfit. She, accidentally, spilled juice over it 10 minutes before the admissions rep arrived. I scrambled upstairs, shaking, trying to salvage something. I came down in a wrinkled dress shirt and shame. The interviewer noticed. Asked politely if everything was okay. Amanda cut in before I could answer. She's just nervous. She gets like this. Later that night, I confronted her. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You always ruin things for yourself. Don't blame me when you fail." When I told Mom what happened, she sighed, long and tired, and said, "Sweetheart, not everything is about you." That sentence stayed with me longer than any apology that never came. Not everything is about you. It echoed in every room I ever entered, every conversation where I swallowed my voice, every job review where I smiled instead of asking for what I'd earned. And now, here I was, 44, curled under a throw blanket in a house that didn't feel like mine, in a life that barely felt real. Amanda's soft footsteps echoed overhead. She was probably asleep. Rested, content. She had her footage, her breakthrough, her version of truth baked and edited and captioned for the world. Meanwhile, my truth was buried. Not in the basement, but in me. At 3:17 a.m., I texted Lorna. Me. "I don't think I can do this." Lorna. "You've already done more than most would." Me. "I feel like I'm going to lose everything." Lorna. "You won't. The things that matter won't leave you." Lorna. "And the things that do, maybe they were never yours to keep." I stared at her last message for a long time. Then, without even realizing, I whispered it out loud. Maybe they were never mine. The tears came suddenly. Not violent. Not even loud. Just release. Like my body couldn't hold the weight of all the pretending anymore. I cried into that thin guest pillow until it went cold. By the time morning light crept across the room, I didn't feel lighter. But I felt cleaner. Amanda knocked around 8. Her tone chipper. "I made waffles," she called. "Come down before they get cold." I pulled myself up slowly. Splashed water on my face. Put on a sweater. Straightened my shoulders. The kitchen was bright. Cheerful. Fake. She'd arranged the blueberries into hearts again. Powdered sugar sifted perfectly like snow. I sat, took the plate, ate in silence. Amanda sipped oat milk from a tumbler with her name printed in rose gold. "You look tired," she said, in that fox, concerned tone she'd perfected. "I didn't sleep much," I replied. "Well, you need to rally today," she chirped. "Tonight's the live surprise drop. Soft launch with the reunion segment. I think we're gonna break a record." I nodded, because I didn't trust myself to speak. Amanda pulled out her phone. Scrolled. Smiled. "People are already asking for pre-sale links on the mugs," she said. I stared at the window. The trees outside swayed gently in the wind. One of them bent slightly to the left, just like it had when we were kids. It was the only thing that hadn't changed. She kept talking. Planning. Branding. I heard every word and none of it. The truth is, grief doesn't always show up in black clothes and sad songs. Sometimes it arrives at a kitchen table, wearing blush and blue light glasses, with a matching mug and a caption that reads, "Forgiveness is strength." But I wasn't grieving Amanda. I was grieving the version of myself that still needed her approval. Later, when she left to meet with her media team, I took the camcorder card from my suitcase. Slipped it into my laptop. No edits. No transitions. Just raw footage. There she was, standing at the top of the basement stairs, looking into the lens. She thinks this is healing, Amanda said, with a smirk. Let's see if she lasts till morning. Then she laughed. The laugh wasn't cruel. It was casual, like this was just another step in her campaign. I paused the video, sat back. My hands weren't shaking this time. Because now, I knew. She didn't care if I forgave her. She only cared if it sold. When you lose everything, do you still have the courage to fight? I boiled water for tea like it was armor. Chamomile. Always chamomile. Not because it calmed me, but because it reminded me of the last time I still believed Amanda was capable of love. Steam curled up into the cold kitchen air. Her counters gleamed. Her curated cookbook opened to a page she'd never used. I let the kettle scream before I moved. It was the only loud thing I allowed myself. That morning, she left early for a shoot. Some vineyard event 30 miles out. She needed golden hour, she said. Good, I needed silence. I pulled out my laptop, backed everything up again. Drive, offline, encrypted, each file labeled in the most boring way possible. Grocery list Q4. Finances August 2019. Insurance paperwork. Let her find that. I stared at the file I hadn't opened in years. Letters, Jolene. My thumb hovered. Clicked. The screen filled with scanned notes, my mother's handwriting. Rigid, elegant, distant. One letter stood out. Written in 2011, 2 years after Dad died. Amanda needs you to understand she's under pressure. Her behavior isn't personal. We protect family by protecting each other's reputations. You're stronger, Caroline. You've always been stronger. Don't provoke her. I sat back in the chair. That sentence again, the one I could never unhear, you're stronger. So stay quiet. The printer warmed under my fingers. I printed 3 copies. One for Lorna. One for the lawyer I hadn't called yet but knew I would. One for me. The page came out warm, faintly smelling of toner and memory. I slid it into a plastic sleeve. Labeled it pattern. Not incident. My phone buzzed. Private number. I let it ring once. Twice. Then picked up. Caroline. My mother's voice. Cool. Even. I didn't say anything. She filled the silence. I saw the teaser. You look tired. Are you eating? I almost laughed. Why are you calling? I asked. There was a pause. Why? Amanda and I. We didn't know you'd take it this far. I said nothing. She said it was symbolic. She said you agreed to it. I closed my eyes. You knew, I said. You knew about the basement, didn't you? Another pause. Longer. She promised it was safe. That it was a callback to childhood. Something you used to do together. You weren't there, Mom. I didn't need to be, she replied. She said you were fine. She lied. Well, sweetheart, truth is complicated when there are cameras involved. I exhaled. I don't want your explanations. I just wanted you to say it was wrong. She didn't. Instead, she asked, what are you planning to do? I let that hang in the air like a guillotine. Are you recording this? I asked. Silence. Then a soft, clipped, goodbye, Caroline. She hung up. I didn't cry. Not this time. I brewed a second cup of tea. Opened Amanda's desk drawer. Pulled out a folder labeled Media Roadmap. Inside interview dates, sponsored content lists, brand alignment phrases like resilient women rise together. From fracture to fame. Caroline's Confession, a limited series pitch. My name. Everywhere. No one had asked me if I wanted any of it. I scanned. Saved. Tucked the folder back exactly where it was. I walked into the sunroom. Turned on my voice recorder. I have no interest in ruining Amanda. I just want my story back. I paused. My mother once said silence is how we protect family. But all silence ever did was make me invisible in my own life. That night, I wrote one email. Taz Alton Perkins, JD, subject inquiry, quiet consultation body. I'm not seeking a fight. I'm seeking protection, documentation, and clarity. There is footage being used without my consent. There are narratives being monetized with my name, and there is a basement I did not agree to be left in. I pressed send. Closed the laptop. Closed the day. Amanda got home late. Happy. Buzzed from compliments. Tossed her coat, poured herself wine. You'll want to be camera ready by the weekend, she said. Big drop. Real tears. We'll sell the basement as a metaphor. People eat that up. She looked over her glass. You good with that? I met her eyes. She blinked first. Sure, I said. I'll be ready. And I meant it. Just not for the reason she thought. Would you go public or stay silent to keep the peace? Have you ever reached a point where silence became too heavy to carry? If this chapter struck something in you, tell me where you're listening from. I'm listening, too. Subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more real stories about justice, healing, and quiet strength after 40. Amanda left the house at exactly 8:06 a.m. I know because I timed her. SUV engine. Garage door. Silence. I didn't move for 2 full minutes. Then I poured myself coffee, added cinnamon the way she hates. Settled into the dining room with my laptop, and opened a folder I'd been building quietly, piece by piece. I called it Truth, Unpolished. Inside camcorder footage, unedited raw screenshots of bright grit contracts, audio clips from my phone, PDFs of mom's letters, my voice memos. 1. Scan of the outline she taped behind the mirror. It wasn't rage that moved me. It was rhythm. I'd spent years staying out of the frame. Now, I wasn't stepping in for spotlight, just balance. At 9:03 a.m., Lorna called. Are you sure? She asked. Yes. No going back after this, Caroline. I know. She paused. Then, good, I'm in. I emailed her a link to the folder. Encrypted. Passworded. We used the same system we created back in 2021 when a former manager tried to take credit for a historic archive I digitized. We won that fight with facts, not feelings. By 11:15 a.m., I had a reply from Alton. Subject: a few notes before we move forward. The footage is damning, especially when paired with the written materials. If the podcast or campaign launches commercially, we have a strong IP claim. You hold moral rights over any depiction of your image, name, and voice without clear release. He included a template, a statement, precise, emotionally neutral, legally tight. I copied it into a blank doc. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened my personal blog. Not the one linked to my professional site. The private one, the one I hadn't touched since 2020. It was still there. Title: Annotations between sisters. 12 readers. Mostly friends from grad school, but this wasn't for followers. It was for record. I drafted. I never asked to be part of a story, but when someone builds their success by reshaping your silence, you learn that quiet isn't peace. This isn't vengeance. It's restoration. I paused. Listened to the fridge hum. The radiator hiss. The pulse in my throat slow and steady. At 1:30 p.m., I met Lorna at a coffee shop 2 towns over. Neutral ground. She wore a gray sweater, no makeup. Didn't ask how I was. Just passed me a flash drive. Off the record save, she said. Also, 3 journalists have pinged me quietly since the teaser. I didn't answer. Yet. Hold them, I said. We didn't talk more than 15 minutes. By 300, I was back at Amanda's, sitting on her porch with a planner open and pen in hand. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was mapping a timeline. 1 column, her public calendar. 2nd column, my documentation dates. 3rd, possible pressure points. PR, sponsors, legal triggers. That's how you build quiet justice. Not with flames, with facts. The camcorder footage would be phase 1. No music, No editing. Just one clip, uploaded at the right moment. The blog post would go up within an hour of her launch. Before spin could take hold. Phase 2. Legal letter from Alton. Time 24 hours after the drop. That way, she'd be in too deep to pivot. It would sting. But not enough to bleed. That was the point. I didn't want her ruined. I wanted her stopped. At 4:47 p.m., Amanda texted Amanda, "Big live tomorrow. We film the final forgiveness arc. Full circle. Amanda. Also. Can you cry a little? Not like sob. Just tear up. Feels more real." I didn't respond. I just closed my planner, checked the locks on my suitcase, and printed one more copy of the contract, just in case. That night, we ate in silence. She lit a candle, poured wine. "You've been quiet lately?" she said. I took a sip. "I've been listening." "To what?" "To everything." She didn't ask what I meant. She just smiled. Because she thought the story was hers again. And that was fine. Because by this time tomorrow, she wouldn't be the only narrator anymore. I posted the video at 8:02 a.m. My hands were steady, but my chest wasn't. Not fear, something sharper. Like the moment before a glass shatters, like a string pulled too tight for too long. No filters, no transitions, no hashtags. Just a truth that had waited 15 years in silence. Amanda's voice filled the frame, smiling like it was a prank. "She thinks this is healing," she told the lens. "Let's see if she lasts till morning." She laughed. Not a sinister laugh. Just casual. Like someone describing a funny inconvenience. The way you'd say your coffee spilled. The screen went black for a second. Then it was me. Wrapped in a wool blanket. Sitting in the basement. Pale, blinking into the dark. My voice soft, flat, almost breaking. "I'm not 15 anymore." I hadn't planned what to say, but that's what came out. That one line. I uploaded the video with a caption so simple it felt like breathing. "I never asked to be a story. But now you get the truth." I closed the laptop. Then I sat at the edge of Amanda's bed, feet flat on the floor, palms resting on denim. The light in the guest room crept across the rug like it had nowhere to be. I watched it move. And waited. By 8:31 a.m., the video had 42,000 views. I didn't refresh. I didn't need to. At 9:07, Lorna called. I picked up on the first ring. "You did it," she said. Her voice was half breath, half disbelief. "They're scrambling," she added after a beat. I checked. Amanda's teaser. Gone. Podcast pages down. Sponsors hiding replies. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I didn't do it to ruin her. I whispered. "I know," she said. "That's why it's working." By 9:45, it was over 100 Zalozen. By 2012, strangers were tagging Amanda's brand in their stories. Some wrote essays in the comments. Others just typed, "We see you." I didn't reply. To any of them. Not because I didn't care. Because I cared too much. I knew this wasn't applause. It was accountability. And it came fast, without warning. Like a wave swallowing the stage before the curtain even falls. At 10:51, my phone buzzed. Alton. Subject line, "Got it." I opened the attachment. Amanda's signed contract with Bright Grit Media. Clause 4.3 stared at me like a dare. Influencer shall produce 3 high-engagement family conflict posts per quarter. Viral preference, betrayal, reunion, regret. I reread the line. Then again. So that's what I was. A quarter's worth of regret. I didn't hesitate. Forwarded the file to 2 reporters Lorna trusted. No commentary, just the truth. By noon, things started unraveling. One of Amanda's sponsors issued a statement. "We were unaware of the circumstances shown in the footage and have suspended all partnerships." Another pulled her face from their homepage. A legal podcast I'd never heard of dissected the contract on air, sentence by sentence. I didn't listen. Lorna did. "She's going to try to flip it," she warned. Make it look like redemption again. I know. Are you ready for that? I am. But I wasn't. Not really. Because at 3:47, the phone rang again. Blocked number. I should have let it go. But I picked up. Caroline. My father's voice said. Slower. Older. I saw the tape. He said again. And for a second, I was 14, waiting at the dinner table while Amanda cried upstairs, and he told me to be quiet. To not make it worse. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't say he was sorry. I knew about that night. He finally admitted. I just didn't think it would get this far. This far? I asked. He hesitated. I mean public. The silence between us thickened. It went this far, when I was locked behind a door and you looked away. I said. When you pretended not to see how she operated. When Mom called me difficult instead of asking what actually happened. There was a long pause on his end. So long I thought maybe he'd hung up. Then, softly, it was a mistake. A bad one. But we're still family. That word. Still. Like love should survive betrayal without acknowledgement. Like blood was a reason to forget. No, I said. Not angry. Not loud. Just done. No, we're not. I ended the call. My hands were steady. Steadier than they'd been in days. Maybe weeks. By evening, Amanda's accounts had gone dark. No reels. No curated, healing quotes. Just a blank grid and a disappearing name. I didn't cheer. I didn't screenshot it for memories. I just opened the window in the sunroom. Let the wind push into the space like a quiet exhale. Lorna showed up at sunset, brought Thai food and tea bags. We sat cross-legged on the rug, said nothing for a while. She finally broke the silence. You feel lighter now, I thought. Not about Amanda, but about that basement. The quiet, the blinking red light, my own voice saying, I'm not 15 anymore. It's like dropping a chain, I said. Not freedom, just less weight. At 8:12 p.m., I opened my blog. The same one with 12 readers and 0 ambition. I uploaded a still frame from the camcorder footage. Me, curled in the corner of the basement. Eyes wide, hoodie pulled tight around my shoulders. Then I added a second photo me, that morning. Standing on Amanda's porch in the same sweater, no makeup, no ring light, just wind in my hair and something different in my eyes. Not sadness, not rage, clarity. Caption, truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just refuses to be erased. I hit publish. No tags, no outreach. Just release. Afterward, I sat in the armchair by the fireplace. The logs had long since cooled, but I didn't light them. I wanted the quiet. Real quiet. Not the kind Amanda sold in her coaching guides. The kind where no one expects a performance. Where no one is recording. The kind where I finally belonged. The tea Lorna made was still warm. We didn't talk much. She just handed me the cup and wrapped the blanket around my shoulders. There was a kind of comfort in being witnessed. Without commentary. No advice, no hashtags. Just presence. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt leveled. Solid. Like I could breathe in my own life again. And maybe that was enough. Later that night, I stood on the back porch alone. The air had that early winter bite, sharp, but not cruel. Leaves rustled across the patio like whispers. I pulled the blanket tighter and looked out at the sky. There were no stars, just layers of gray clouds rolling slow and steady above the tree line. It felt honest somehow. Unpretty, unfiltered, and still real. I thought about all the things I didn't say. To Amanda. To my mother. To the world. But I also thought about what I had said. With silence. With restraint. With facts instead of fury. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. For every woman who's ever been edited out of her own story. For every daughter told to be quiet because she was the strong one. For everyone who whispered the truth to herself in the dark. waiting for morning. I didn't need an apology. I didn't even need closure anymore. I just needed to know I hadn't imagined it, that what happened mattered, that I mattered, and now I did. The truth was out, and I was still here, no longer 15, no longer waiting to be seen, just standing in the quiet, finally mine. Would you have done the same? The house was still, not silent in the haunting way, but peaceful. No filming, no ring lights, no scripts taped behind mirrors. Just the soft hum of the heater and the smell of cinnamon from a candle I lit. Not for branding, but for myself. I had spent the last 4 days packing. Quietly. Deliberately. Amanda hadn't returned. She was still offline, according to Lorna. Her team had gone dark, her followers scattered, and me. I was still here. I folded the last sweater, gray, worn, not Instagram-worthy, and zipped my bag. Then I walked through the house one last time. The guest room looked untouched. The office was locked, but I had taken what mattered. In the hallway, I paused in front of a photo. Us, age 6 and 10. Halloween costumes. Me as a librarian, her as a fairy. Even then, we knew who we'd become. I didn't cry. Instead, I took out a note I'd written and taped it gently to her office door. I never wanted your platform. I only wanted my story back. Then I placed the spare key on the counter. And left. I drove 2 hours west to a small Airbnb tucked between pine trees and silence. No Wi-Fi, no cameras. Just signal enough to get texts. That night, I turned on my phone for the first time since I left. 87 unread messages. I didn't open them all. But I opened one. It was from a woman named Elise, 52, from Indiana. I watched your video 3 times. I was never locked in a basement. But I know that look. I lived with that silence. Thank you for naming it. I sat on the porch and let her words wash over me. They weren't praise. They were connection. Another message came in. Then another. And another. None of them asked for drama. None wanted. What happened next? They wanted to be seen. To say, my too. Without needing proof. The wind picked up. Leaves scattered across the gravel path. And for the first time I didn't brace against it. I let it pass through me. Like memory. Like grief. Like healing. The next morning, I made coffee the way I like it. Too strong, no cream. I sat at a wooden table with scratches across the surface. The kind no one hides with filters. Real. Earned. I opened my laptop. Not to write a takedown, not to post another clip. I opened a blank document and typed what I kept that day. And then, line by line, I began to list it: my name, my voice, my ability to walk away, my right to truth, even if it's not convenient, my refusal to perform forgiveness, my story. That was my legacy. Not the fight. Not the fallout. But the choice to stand in the center of something painful. And not move. Later that afternoon, I replied to Elise. I didn't think anyone would understand the kind of silence that doesn't make a sound. Thank you for hearing mine. And I meant it, because sometimes we don't need a stage. Just a witness. 2 days later, I drove home to Colorado Springs. My small apartment still smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and paperbacks. The air was dry. Familiar. There was a tiny crack in the kitchen tile I'd meant to fix for years. I left it. I unpacked slowly. One book, one sweater, one notebook at a time. When I pulled out the camcorder, I didn't flinch. I didn't erase it. I placed it in a drawer. Not to forget, but to remember how far I had come. That evening, I scrolled through my contacts. Paused at Dad. Then Mom. Blocked both. No ceremony. No rage, just stillness. They had chosen their silence. Now I chose mine. I lit a candle, made soup, opened a folder on my desktop labeled Clarity. Inside were the same files. But now I didn't need to guard them. I already had. Outside the window, dusk fell over the city. Not heavy, just quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't demand anything. The kind that lets you begin again. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The kitchen light spilled gold across the floor. I stood barefoot, holding a mug I hadn't used in years. World's Best Sisters. Faded and chipped. I almost laughed. Not bitter, just tired in a way that finally felt clean. I set it down. Poured fresh coffee into my own mug. No label. No quote. Just mine. I walked to the bookshelf, pulled down an old photo tucked inside a journal. It was me at 16, standing in the school library, smiling like I still belonged to myself. I placed the photo on my desk, right next to the candle, right where I could see it. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't schedule another post. But I left the blog open. Because maybe someday, someone else would find it. At 3 a.m. Searching for their own voice. And maybe they'd know. The quiet ones survived too. Monday morning, I walked back into the campus library. I hadn't been there since last winter. The old wood floor creaked the same way. My desk had dust. My chair still squeaked. No one clapped. No one mentioned the video. They just smiled and nodded. And it was perfect. I spent the morning shelving books in silence. The good kind. The earned kind. At noon, I found an anonymous sticky note on my desk. Some of us needed your voice. Thank you. I pressed it into the back of my planner. Didn't need to know who. Just needed to know someone heard it. Later that night, I stepped outside and let the cold hit my skin. Not to numb it, just to remember I was still here. Still breathing. Still standing. Have you ever found your peace where they said you'd never survive? If this story stayed with you, share your truth. You are not alone. Subscribe to EN Reddit Story for more real stories of quiet justice, closure, and empowerment after 40.